CAO Morris, could you let us know which staff are joining us tonight?
Yes, certainly. We have, let's see, we have Director Manhire here with us this evening, Director Costello, Director McMunn, if he's not here, is on his way. We have Julia Crowder with us this evening, Chief Cheeseborough, our Treasurer Janet Kozil, Senior Planner Carl Grenke, and Nadine Bennett, our Deputy Clerk.
Thank you. It seems we have a full complement of staff as well. I will start with the land acknowledgement. On Monday, December 6th, we acknowledge that this sacred land on which Smith Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who have cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. With that said, then, are there any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, are there any disclosures of monetary interest? Yes, Councillor Dwyer, Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm going to declare conflict on item 8.5 heritage designations because it talks about properties that are owned by my parents.
Okay, thank you. If there are any other conflicts that come up during the meeting, please don't hesitate to let us know. There are no delegations this evening. Not the kind we normally have. We'll see one of those during the priority items, but can I have a motion to adopt the minutes of October 25th, 2021 and November 8th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meetings to be received and filed? Moved by Councillor Dwyer, seconded by Councillor Allen. All those in favor? That's carried. CAO Morris, do you want to introduce any directors' reports that you might have?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We have one, and that will be coming from Ms. Crowder.
Thank you. Julia, you can please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, and to the rest of council, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Heritage Museum for their event they put on this weekend. It was really well done and well attended. We had over 70 people attend the event. There was sleigh rides and photos with Santa. The majority of people who attended were from Smith Falls. There are a number from the Ottawa region as well. So again, to all the staff and the volunteers who were there, great job.
Yes, thank you. The Heritage House always does a good job. Nothing more, CAO Morris?
That's it for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We will ask now for the patience of our viewers as we have to go in camera to deal with a couple of issues pertaining to potential litigation, and we move to a closed session as provided by section 239 2E of the Municipal Act. So can I have a motion to move in camera? By Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor McKenna. All those in favor? Thank you. We'll be back as quickly as possible.
Okay, Madam Chair, it appears that we are back now, so we can commence.
And live.
And we will be live in 3, 2, 1.
Thank you for your patience. We have, in the closed session, we disposed of 2 matters. One, council gave direction to staff, and that issue will be added to priority item tonight as 8.7. Is that correct, clerk? Okay.
Yes.
And the second, council gave direction to staff regarding litigation of a matter before an administrative tribunal that affects the municipality. And so with that all said, then we're going to move directly into priority items. And the first one is with our Director McMunn, 8.1, adoption of the active transportation plan and complete streets policy. So welcome, Director McMunn, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, members of council. So this evening, if it's all right with the chair, what I would like to do is do a brief introduction to our friends from WSP here this evening, have them do their presentation, then I'll follow up with my report after that.
Perfect. If you could introduce the WSP reps then, please, Paul.
Yeah, so this evening, Kimberly and Nikki have been with us before doing presentations with respect to the active transportation plan. So I'm pleased that they're here this evening to present their final report for this assignment, and quite excited to hear from Kimberly and Nikki this evening, as I'm sure council is as well. So we can get some direction from council as to how we would wish to proceed with this active transportation plan and complete streets policy. With that, so without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Kimberly and Nikki to start the presentation. And the floor is yours, Nikki and Kimberly.
Thanks. So I did try to share my screen. However, it doesn't seem to, it does say I'm sharing. So everybody sees the presentation?
Yes, it's quite fine, Kim.
Oh, great. Thank you, Chair. So thank you. Yes, we have been here before, and I want to thank you, Chair Alfred and councillors, for having us back again to bring forward the final plan. So the last time we saw you, it was just before we had our open house. And so we have incorporated the comments that we received following the open house and finalized some of those last details that needed to go into the recommendations of the plan. And that's what we are bringing forward. We do have a bit of an introduction here. Just some of the stuff will be things that you have seen before, but we'll kind of go through those pretty briefly just to kind of give the overall picture if anybody hasn't been involved up until this process. So the first thing, really, just to give you a very high level of the overview of what the plan is. We'll talk about the vision and the goals and what came out of the plan, because we didn't have those before. What we heard from the public through our consultation that we carried out in the network development, how we did it, and what ended up being the recommendation for the cycling and the pedestrian networks and projects, and then move into the implementation plan, which is the getting it built part and the core recommendations that have come out of the plan itself. So as presented previously, the active transportation the plan ultimately provides guidance on how to implement a connected network with policy and strategic initiatives that help support that infrastructure as it gets built. We're now here on step 4, which is the plan preparation and plan. We've got the cost estimates complete. We've gone through and come up with what the priority side and the phasing is based on the public consultation and the feedback that we received. And have completed the report that was available for review. The vision and the goal. So when we look at the vision, really what we're ultimately aiming for here is to provide a safe, accessible, and convenient active transportation network that connects major local and regional destinations, encourages diverse travel options, and promotes a high quality of life for residents of all ages and abilities. for Smiths Falls. And ultimately, to get to that vision, we've established 7 goals that are carried forward in the plan, and each of the recommendations form part of the 7 goals are part of the strategic plan, and then each of the recommendations fit into one of these goals and that side of things. So make active transportation a viable travel choice. This is where we come into implementation of some infrastructure and policy that supports it. Number 2, financial sustainability. So this is where we tie it into planned capital works and make it so that it's joined with other projects that it can be implemented in a affordable kind of way. Healthy and livable communities comes down to education and programs, which also then feeds into the support and active transportation culture, which also is some of the other outreach initiatives, such as amenities or wayfinding. Make active transportation convenient and enjoyable. And so this is where we're connecting to key destinations and making it so that the selection criteria focuses on making it a network that ultimately people can use. Provide tourism and economic growth opportunities. This lies in connecting to some of the external beyond the boundary, but also to some of those key areas that we want to have people visit within the town. And community involvement. And this is where we have a number of partnerships suggested that can help with the overall implementation. And this is where some of the outreach side of things and education and some of those partnerships can come into play and help get things going and done. So the public consultation program, we had brought forward previously the survey results. We had 244 people that participated. And as you may recall, most people had identified if they were using active transportation, most people had identified as a pedestrian. And if they were using it, it was for fitness and health and recreation. And then when we, some of the information that might be a little bit new and how we were kind of building onto the plan was how often do you cycle within the town? And where 2% is every day, we have that very large 67% that is the never. And we really want to see, as part of the plan being implemented and one of the monitoring side of things, some of the shift of this circle where, some of those never move into a few times a year, maybe a few times a year, a few times a month. And eventually there's sort of that shift in the overall percentage of how people are using, how many people are using cycling around town in the future, and monitoring that as we start implementing some of our projects. So the next piece is the key barriers, and we had talked about this before. 59%, it was the condition or lack of facilities, and the reasons for not cycling, 36%, it was that they don't own a bike. And then we also have the don't feel safe on the facilities, or they're not confident with their skills. And so these were 2 things really that build onto what the recommendations are. So when it talks about, 59% are bringing up the condition and lack of facilities, obviously that's a lot of the key infrastructure that we're suggesting in the recommendations. And then not feeling confident with abilities brings in the education component, and not owning a bike, the bike share kind of recommendation that we would have as part of the outreach initiatives. We had brought forward last time the proposed networks and information to yourselves, and then we brought that out to the public for a public consultation, a public information center. And with current situations, everything was virtual. We did an interactive kind of program where people could comment on the network right within a Miro tool. It's an online tool that we used, and vote on priorities for the programming initiatives, as well as provide comments on the network. And while we had 15 participants, they were really vocal and really involved participants, and we had we had so many good comments that really brought forward and changed how we had a few of the projects that we were suggesting. Some of those key network components and comments that we received were about pedestrian crossovers and having a desire on Elmsley Street and along Abbott for some additional pedestrian crossovers. And you'll see that when we get into the recommendations. Having separation for pedestrians on Old Slies Road. And Old Slies Road was a really big topic of conversation. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more moving forward as well. And then having connections beyond the town itself. and to some of the trail side of things. And from a programming initiative side of components, wayfinding, but having the education component where it's skills training through bike rodeos or through other initiatives, and formalizing some hubs with amenities and things like bike repair stations and bike parking and that kind of thing really hit home with a lot of the people that participated in the open house. So the network development process, there's a lot of words here, but it kind of really just steps through, you know, five simple steps. They all have different components to them, but 5 steps of the first one being identifying existing and planned facilities, identifying the selection criteria and the gaps, selecting the routes then through the criteria that we identified, and having a desktop review and a field review to make sure that those can be the candidate routes. Step 4 then confirms the proposed network and identifies what the facility type is, and then we prioritize those projects to ultimately come up with our phased plan. When we looked at route selection criteria, you may recall we kind of connected them into 4 main areas: desirable, connected, logical, and cost effective. Connected being to your key destinations, the trails that are existing, and some of the amenities. Logical, really just making sure that it made sense and people wouldn't get lost along the way. And then making sure it's cost effective when it comes time to implement. And when it comes time to identify what facility types there are, we really focus and use the Ontario Traffic Manual Book 18. This is for cycling facilities, and it identifies how we come up with what our networks are, but also how we can identify what is the best facility choice. It's all based on traffic volume and speed primarily, and then there's some judgment that goes in, and it all connects to how much separation there is. And there's one that's separate for urban and suburban context, where you have curbs and sidewalks and these types of facilities, and then one for rural, where it's more about paved shoulders or shoulder space, and where you have a rural cross section, ditches and that side of things. And just a reminder of the different facility types. So we have signed bike route or a shared space, and this is where cyclists and motorized vehicles are operating in the same space. This tends to be on your local roads or your smaller roads, or the lower vehicle volume roads, lower speed roads. Paved shoulders and bike lanes provide designated space for cyclists within a painted space, and it's purely just by painting a line on the existing asphalt. We can make those buffered, either bike lanes or buffered shoulders, and that goes into the idea of having additional separation between the cyclist and the motorized vehicles. And sometimes these buffers are also provided in areas where we might have parking, so that there's a space for the doors to open without hitting a cyclist that's going by in an adjacent facility. And then we also have the physically separated facilities, and this comes in down to your multi-use pathways, where we have cyclists, hikers, walkers, strollers, mobility devices. Everybody's all in the same facility. It's bi-directional. It's completely separate from the motorized vehicles, and typically about 3 meters wide, so that it's 2-directional, people can pass. Dedicated facility where cyclists and pedestrians and vehicles and everybody has their own space through a cycle track, and this is your facility here on Beckwith. And then the other one is the shared walking and cycling facility, and this is kind of a combination of the two, where we repurpose maintenance strips, and we're talking about this one here because we do have a few examples of this in our recommended plan. And really, ideally, it becomes a unidirectional. It's kind of like a multi-use pathway where cyclists and pedestrians are using the same space. Pedestrians can walk both ways. They use it as a sidewalk, but cyclists would use it as a unidirectional one-way cycle track. They're in a dedicated space, but it's behind a curb. And these tend to be known as maintenance strips sometimes, or splash areas. They're a paved area right now, and they're within the existing right of way. So some of the examples where we're looking at using that space that's already there and keeping the curb to minimize some of the construction that would be required is on Cornelia Street, between Beckwith and Union. Union Street between Alexander and Northern, at the boundary, sorry, right up to the boundary. And then Ferreira Drive between Lombard and Abbott, and Lombard Street west of Abbott Street. And so these are cases where we have some of these strips that are existing, the curbs are there, the mountable curbs are there. And so to try and make it cost effective to implement a cycling facility with some paint markings and that kind of thing, we've used this type of application. So the proposed cycling network, really the cycling network aims to, we've talked about it, the continuous and connected network, having consideration of key destinations and how people are going to get to those key destinations. And we really wanted to build off of the already planned and implemented Beckwith Street revitalization. And so given the phase 2, we have phase 1 finished, but phase 2 is taking place already. That's kind of as already an existing facility. It's not something, it's far enough along that we don't put it as part of our plan. And then we build from there. And so on the network itself, so these yellow lines are our overall network, and you can see how they kind of form main connections through the town, through different areas. Local roads would typically, are your smaller roads, lower volumes, and they typically would have like a signed bike route. Collector roads are those ones that the local roads are connecting to. A little bit busier, a little more traffic. They tend to have more designated spaces like bike lanes or paved shoulders. And then we also have arterial roads. These are your main bigger roads through town, carry most traffic, and those are where we want to have some designated space through more physical separation, either through a raised cycle track or some bollards or that type of thing. And so some of the example projects we have on Rideau, we have some paved shoulders along Rideau north and south that are recommended. On Lombard Street, we have the cycle track. We have a cycle track that's proposed on Lombard Street west of Abbott to serve the commercial area. Bike lanes on Chambers between Elmsley and Beckwith to form that connection. And then also on Broadview Avenue here, where there's a number of schools, bike lanes are proposed along here. And it doesn't mean there's also facilities on all these other ones, but we just wanted to highlight a couple of the ones that were A, identified as priority and talked about, and B, ones that we think are a good representation of some of the key projects. On the pedestrian side, the proposed pedestrian projects are really looking to fill in notable gaps within the network that we have already out there and improve some of the existing facilities that may not necessarily be accessible currently. So an example of this is through Lower Reach Park. We have the trail and the pathway right now, but it's a stone dust surface. It's not very wide. So upgrading that to be a hardened surface that's more easily accessible for mobility devices and that side of things, as well as a wider surface for passing is one of the recommendations. We also want to address some of the safety concerns. So Old Slies Road, there was a lot of safety concerns that were identified of Old Slies Road and the pedestrian crossing at that location, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. And then we also want to account for some of the traffic volume growth that we've got near the Tweed employment node, and have some of the key destination safe connections to the schools. So as I mentioned, one of the things that came out of the public consultation was really about having some crossovers. Pedestrian crossovers are something that are relatively new that can be implemented as part of the Book 15, OTM Book 15, Ontario Traffic Manual, and are more formalized crossings. They're being implemented all over Ontario now, and they really form a more formalized crossing for getting pedestrians from across the road. There's different levels depending on the volumes, depending on the speeds. So there's different types of crossovers that suit the context of them. As well, it provides some opportunities. So in examples where we have a sidewalk on one side of the road, it's a lot more cost effective to implement a pedestrian crossover in some cases where we might not have a sidewalk on the other side instead of going in and putting a whole new sidewalk on a second side of the road that might not serve as many destinations. And so we had a number of pedestrian crossovers identified previously, but as part of the consultation, there was a number of new ones that were identified. So we have 10 now at this point, and some of the new ones were on Elmsley. So there was a desire about some difficulty in getting across between where the existing signalized intersections are, and having some opportunity for some of the connections between the neighborhood, which we thought was a good idea. On Abbott Street by Duck Island and near the water tower, there's some desire lines right there now. And so having that formalized pedestrian crossover for people that, you know, the vehicles and the pedestrians know exactly where pedestrians are crossing. So that one too was a good idea. We also had the Brockville and Ross. So there's a school crossing down here right now. And this one was recommended to become a more formalized pedestrian crossover. So when we looked at that, that one was added to the overall list. And then the other one that was added was here at Jasper and Vincent. And that's to get into that pathway. When I mentioned we're making a multi-use pathway and a more defined pathway in Lower Reach Park for pedestrians, there'd be paved shoulders on Old Slies on Jasper for cyclists if they want to continue. But if people want to use the pathway in the park, they can. And so having a pedestrian crossover to get into that, onto that pathway, was something that was seen as a good connection. Some of the crossovers were already there. We have one that's proposed on Queen at Hershey, and that's to get in and access to the employment node at Tweed, and also part of the Rideau Trail connection. And then we have one that was on Old Slies at the Curling Club. And so there, as I mentioned, there was a lot of commentary and a lot of comments raised about Old Slies Road and having a pedestrian facility on Old Slies Road and to cross. So we have some limitations, obviously, with the Parks Canada swing bridge and the bridge that's there today. And ultimately, the recommendation here on this crossing was a multi-use pathway, so a bi-directional facility on the west side of the road that utilizes the pedestrian space that's already there on the west side of the road. At the there's a bit of review needed on the bridge on the south, just for space allocation available. But on the swing bridge, the pedestrian space there, taking a look at it and what's feasible, there's not a lot. In that case, there'd be a pedestrian facility that would connect into the multi-use path, but cyclists would have to dismount and walk. And then this pedestrian crossover to the curling club, and having the sort of connection with the Rideau Trail and all of those components that kind of just connect all of these pieces on the south side. So overall, ultimately, in the end, when we add up all of the different facilities that we were adding, and some of these are just signed bike roads and that kind of thing, we have a proposed almost 30 kilometers of facilities that we are adding. And this could be sidewalks, it could be upgrades to trails that exist right now. So like I talked about with Lower Reach, where we're adding a hardened surface or widening the pathway that's there today. It could be signed routes as well. And this is on top of the 115 kilometers that are existing today. And 115 sounds like a lot, but that's when you start adding up all of your sidewalks, all of your trails. It includes like the Rideau Trail where it's suggested. And so ultimately in the end, at the 10 plus years, once everything was implemented, you'd be at 145 kilometers of facilities. And we do have two tables here broken down, and really the second table is the provincial project breakdown. And the reason we broke that out separately is because, well, ultimately the responsibility would be Smith Falls, on the road, the right of way that those facilities are in, and it's primarily Lombard Street. They are on the Highway 15, so consultation would be required with the ministry in those cases. So we just wanted to show that separation. So about 3.5 kilometers are on the provincial Highway 15, where some consultation would be required, and the rest are all right within the Smith Falls, fall right in the Smith Falls right of way. So this is a pretty busy slide, but ultimately what we're talking about are the phasing and how the projects end up getting phased. And we had previously broken down the projects into high priority, medium priority, and low priority. And that was based on whether they were part of the strategic plan initiatives, what the public had wanted to see, what staff priorities were, how frequently people were using facilities today, and that side of things. And then when it comes time to phase the projects, we break them down into 5-year chunks typically. So phase 1 becomes your 2022 to 2027 timeframe. Phase 2 is 2028 to 2032, and then phase 3 is 2032 and beyond, because lots of things can change up until then. And even though we're set up, so we did group all the high priority projects into phase 1, medium projects were put into phase 2, and low priority would have put into phase 3. And while we grouped them like this, and there's a lot of projects within that phase 1 5-year timeframe, ultimately it's based on consultation and priorities can change. We've talked about this a number of times, I know, but it's a strategic plan, the active transportation plan. Things can move, and based on commitments and budgets and those things available. And this, we had felt that in speaking with town staff and through some of the discussions, that having all of the high priority projects in phase 1 provided a lot of flexibility to town staff and to councillors for bringing up really some of those key priority projects that were brought up. And then oh, sorry, I should have wanted to say one more thing. So there were 3 projects that we wanted to highlight. They were in the priority 1, but they also, we saw those as some of those really big ones, as, you know, while they're priority 1 and phase 1, they would probably be the ones that you want to tackle first. And this is, a lot of this is based on consultation and through the town staff town staff discussions, and then through our own observations on what the information had. And so those are on Hershey. There's buffered paved shoulders that are planned on Hershey. It has a large employment node. It provides a good connection, and it's part of the Rideau Trail facility. And so there's some good opportunities there as a high priority project. Old Slides, I think, I mean, if anybody, you know, for those of you that were in attendance at the open house, you heard how many times it came up. It came up a ton during the survey. I think town staff and councillors, you've all probably heard lots and lots of comments about Old Slides. And so that one is one that we had brought up. And this one here, a feasibility review on how we can widen. There's a steel guide rail that would need to be shifted, but if the bridge needed to be widened, or a cantilever off of the one side or something like that, a feasibility review, we'd want to take a look and see what that could entail. And then the other one came through a lot of the consultation side of things. It was prioritized by town staff and the public through those consultations, and that's Elmsley, where we have a lot of high volume. And these here, it's proposed to be buffered bike lanes, but with a precast curb and bullards that would separate that facility and provide a designated space for cyclists within the existing roadway. And that one, because of the high volumes that we have and the speeds along Elmsley, was seen as one of the projects, you know, amongst all of those high priority projects, so sort of, you know, the high of the high. When it comes time to budget side of things, so when we look at overall the 10 plus and we add up all of those projects together, there's about $4 million worth of projects in the 10 plus years. The high priority projects that are all in phase 1 right now, as they're just displayed in the plan, are $2.4 million. And that's because a lot of those high priority projects are the ones that are on the high volume. They're the ones that need the most infrastructure and that component of it. So they are the higher cost ones. But when it comes time to fund these projects, they get broken down to into 2 pieces, the capital costs and then also a cycling budget per se. So the capital costs, and this is why we ended up, you know, one of the key reasons why we looked at grouping all the high priority projects into phase 1 is because there's the asset management plan that is currently being worked on by the town. And so a lot of these cycling projects are going to feed into those capital projects and be part of those capital projects. And so once we know what capital projects are happening and what road projects are happening, that then is going to help identify what order the cycling projects are going to take place in. And when you're already moving curbs or you're already rebuilding a roadway, adding a cycling facility or adding a sidewalk becomes, very small or scale than having to go out and specifically just do that kind of project. So there's some economies of scale. And so that becomes part of the capital cost and capital budget side of things. And then the town would also be funding a cycling budget, like a line item in the budget that might be things more like the wayfinding strategy and some of our outreach programs, as well as, maybe some additional line painting or signage that goes in after that and at that point of it. And there is a note here at the bottom. There is another funding source, and that's government grants. And there's a lot of government grants out there for active transportation. And they're going to continue to come, and often through cost sharing or by matching funds and those kinds of things. You can also often get an additional about 40% we've seen typically in additional funding that's coming from grant programs. So finally, at the end of all of this, what does it mean? We have 22 recommendations in the active transportation plan. They're all tied back to those 7 goals we talked about at the beginning. There's 3 different areas: the network, outreach, and the implementation plan. From a network side, we have some in here. We've just highlighted a few of them, but the installation of the pedestrian crossovers, obviously that came up as a key one when we were talking about talking to the public and with the consultation that we carried out. Taking an opportunity to upscale recommended facilities when we're doing planned road construction. So even though we might have recommended a bike lane or a buffered bike lane, if the road is being torn apart, it's not that much more to just rebuild it as a cycle track. And so we might have done it from a cost saving side of things, of identifying it as a bike lane. But if we can upscale any of the recommended facilities when it comes time to actually rebuild the road, that's a great thing to do. Considering purchasing and protecting abandoned rail lines if you can. And then from the outreach side, we want to establish an active transportation coordinator. This would be a part-time position to deliver the recommended outreach initiatives. There's a lot of time that would be taxed then on a staff member that probably doesn't have the time to do it. This is often a student position that gets hired for, the term between April to September or October, and they can help with organizing some of the programs. And then carrying out the suggested annual action plans. This is the wayfinding things like the wayfinding strategy, monitoring program, bike rodeos, installing bike parking. Considering the additional design considerations. So some of these are the, we talked about the conversion of the maintenance strips, but also some of other things are like safety zones. If we reduce the speed, we might be able to reduce the amount of facility or infrastructure that might be required. Updating existing bylaws to reflect inclusion in active transportation facilities. These are things like adding in bike parking, or some of the other types of site planning, new developments, these components for the policy side. And then overall at the end, implementing the infrastructure that ultimately at the end of the day, the infrastructure and the plan that's recommended and the network that's recommended. And that is my presentation, which I will thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to stop sharing because I believe now Paul will be taking over.
I appreciate the completeness from Ms. Hunton and Ms. Tsatsulis. For someone that was a 275 pages of report. So it was a lot of work that they put into this, and I think some very interesting discussions to come out of them. So before we take any questions from council, I think we're going to let Director McMunn go ahead with his report, and Ms. Hunton and Ms. Tsatsulis can be on standby if there's something that he needs help with. Appreciate all the work so far, Kim and Nicole.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Director McMunn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to resonate that the hard work and the amount of effort that went into this report is outstanding. I'm very pleased to see it, being a newcomer here to the town myself, that the town was actually, grabbed onto this, incorporated it into future years' budgetary proceedings. This active transportation plan and complete streets policy is going to be just that. It serves as a planning document for the community for coming budget years well into the future. As Kimberly mentioned, we know that we have infrastructure within town that is in need of repair, whether it be through, paving operations or concrete works or full reconstructions of roads. And that's where we can really, I guess, maybe perhaps deviate from the plan a little bit in such a way that, as Kimberly mentioned, through those reconstructions or paving projects where we can incorporate some of the priority items within the plan to get some economies of scale going forward. So that is something that we need to be cognizant moving forward. I'm just going to read the recommendation here this evening. I won't babble on too long here this evening, because I think Kimberly captured most, if not all, of what we're looking for. So the recommendation this evening is that Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smith Falls adopt the active transportation plan and complete streets policy prepared by WSP Canada. So staff are fully supportive of this. Myself and Vanessa and other key players at the town have been working with WSP throughout this process, whether it be through the planning itself or participating in some of the public meetings and whatnot. Now, Kimberly had mentioned that some of our sessions, we had a good turnout, albeit, maybe 15 people, but those people that did participate were very active and very, they had a lot of comments that were well received and made sense from a planning perspective. So that was very, very nice to see. And yeah, so I won't say too much more than that. I guess the long and the short of it for this evening is to present this through the presentation that Kimberly had here this evening, and to get council support. Like I said, it's a planning document for future years, and we will from a staffing perspective, we will use it for just for those purposes. So with that, through the chair, we'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Can I just ask, so that I can see everyone's hands, can I just ask Kim and Nicole to turn your cameras off and then turn them on if we need you to speak, so that I can see all of council at the same time? Thank you. Okay, so I'm sure there will be comments, and I think I saw Councillor Allen's hand up first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is wonderful news. As this is my 11th year as a councillor in Smith Falls, and we've been talking about, we've had workshops and we've had organizations get together at the arena many times to talk about what does active transportation mean in our town. And I think that this is just a very well-designed document. Will we always have the money? That's going to be up to many councils, I think, over the years. But in my view, having 5 grandchildren live in this community that want to bike and run and hike, it's a very necessary part. And, we've heard from, and Jay and the mayor and I, we've heard about old slides, I think, for the whole 11 years. People worried about the safety of that strip. And so that I'm just using that one as an example of the kinds of things that I'm glad finally we're going to be able to address. I like the idea that the plan can be incremental. You can just do things when we have the money and the availability of resources. So I just want to thank you for how thorough this is, and I look forward to seeing this come back and be completed over the years.
Thank you. Mayor Panko and then Councillor McGuire.
Yeah, not to repeat what's been said, but it's a very extensive and complete document. And I admit I was looking forward to this, and when I started to read the reports on the weekend, the volume was far greater than I anticipated because the detail is in there. And I think it's that foundational document that will guide this council and future councils in trying to ensure our community is as pedestrian and cyclist safe as possible. And all the merits, right, of active transportation, and from a health standpoint, from a recreational standpoint, and mental health. And I think we're a small community of less than 10 square kilometers. About 20% of our people don't have access to a car for transportation on a regular basis. So the ability that how this document, this policy will help ensure that we are fulfilling the needs of all our community members going forward. It's very encouraging. So I don't have any questions, because I think everything was so well outlined, including the pedestrian crossovers. And I think that's one thing that's the locations I see are very appropriate. Everything seems extremely well thought out and prepared, and I fully support the recommendation of staff in adopting this and having it stand as our guiding document going forward.
Thank you. Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and big thank you to everybody that worked on this project. As people have said, it's amazing. The highlight for me was the public information session. The software that was used for the public consultation allowed people to contribute anonymously if that's what they preferred, or put their name down if they wanted to be known. I had a great time participating in that, and I left it open on my browser, and I remember 2 hours later, people were still making comments and editing it. It was, I think, one of the best engagements we've had over this term of council, and I hope we get to use that software again in the future. So thank you for bringing that to us. And there's some really great things in here that just because it's so big, it's easy to miss. One of them is the hard surfaces. Getting our multi-purpose trails into hard surfaces. That was a big thing for the accessibility committee, because it's easier to roll something on a hard surface than it is the gravel, and the gravel gets mucked up. Another thing is the second sidewalk on Herald Street. You know, we've how many times has that come to council with the traffic over there being an issue, and to get that second sidewalk, I think will be a big improvement. I've got a few questions. And I'm not sure, because it's just a ton of content to process. So
it is a ton of content, but how about we come back to you with questions? We'll let all of council indicate whether they are supportive or make whatever comments, and then we'll come back to your questions, Councillor McGuire. I'll circle back to you. Any other councillors wish to make comment? No. Councillor McKenna?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too support the moving forward with the document. I do have some questions for later. I also just want to draw the public's attention and my colleagues' attention that the Lanark Leeds Grenville Health Unit endorses active transportation plans and have been for a number of years, encouraging communities to adopt these. So both local, regional, and provincial, there's a lot of synergy around this. So we're aligning ourselves with good public policy. And I think this report does give us the master plan. But as Councillor McGuire, I have a couple of questions for later.
Okay. And Councillor Brennan or Councillor Dwyer, or you just thumbs up on the, no? Okay, yeah, Councillor Brennan.
Oops. Yeah, thanks for the report. It is exhaustive. It's complete. The priorities are, you know, in tune with active transportation, certainly. But my question, I guess, is, and I will support it, is you know, we're in the last year or so of our term, and I know that the future councils may have some differing priorities. I think that that, you know, there's things in here that maybe other councils will have another priority, and Councillor McGuire just mentioned a second sidewalk on Herald. Well, I'm not sure that the traffic warrants that, but you know, that's for individual decisions to be made when they come up. And so my question is, to adopt this, are we going to put a future council or councils hamstrung in making a local decision, or is it just a guide?
C.O. Morris, you have put your hand up there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So good question, and I would submit that it is a plan, and future councils could alter the plan if they wish. So I don't think it commits a future council in a way that they couldn't change it if they wished to, based on changing circumstances in the future. So no, I don't think this limits future council at all.
Yeah, through the chair, I mean, it does give guiding principles. It's just the priorities within the principles that we're presented with. So, you know, when we had when the survey you had, I don't know, 70% of the people were pedestrians and 25% were cyclists. Well, Is that where the council is going to put their first priorities, i.e. old slides, the pedestrian crossings? I noticed one on Vincent and Jasper, which is a great idea, or where the immediate funds go to the other thing. So it's up to council should be up to council to decide on those things, I think.
CEO Morris.
Yeah, I would just respond by saying that each of the capital projects in the plan will be subject to council approval at the time, both at budget time and so there is another layer of approving the individual projects.
Yeah. Just
Okay.
one final comment, Madam Chair, and then I'll be done with it. There was one linkage that was not included here, and that's Confederation Bridge. But you know me, I'll just mention that every time I can mention it.
Yes,
but it would have been nice to have been seen that.
We're aware, Councillor Brennan. I'll circle back to Councillor McGuire then. It appears we have consensus to adopt this. That I don't think that's in question. And if I can just jump ahead of Councillor McGuire, I would say that this is a very valuable piece of work, much like the downtown and waterfront master plan. It'll inform decisions. It helps staff in deciding what to incorporate in their projects or what needs to be incorporated in their projects. And to speak to Councillor Brennan's, I don't think any future council is bound to follow these priorities. Will change. It's a living document like any strategic plan, and we can set the table for a better planning tool than we've had as relates to folding active transportation into all of our development, a lot of our public works projects. So I don't think it binds anybody, but it does give a direction to future councils and current and future staff as to what this community feels are the priorities. Okay, so back to Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Madam Chair. First suggestion is just page 77. Let's get the OPP switched to Smith Falls Police. That's the easiest one. And I love the idea of using the data. I wish we could have done that on Beckwith Street. For the on-road bicycle route that's existing, I'm wondering what is that current facility? What is that? How does that exist in the current form? And what does the shared space look like? In my head, any space would be shared space, but I'm just wondering what will delineate these areas.
Can I interrupt for a second? It would appear that we have consensus to adopt this. And I'm wondering, again, with my colleagues' agreement, whether the questions should be sent directly to McMahon and WSP to get more clarification on those particular items that any councillor might have. Is that the best use of our time, or Councillor McGuire, you feel you need these before you can adopt it?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a plan that I hope is going to guide future decision-making for future councils, and to not debate it seems irresponsible. So
you want to debate every issue that's in there, or I don't know how many you have?
Well, there's just under 200 pages of policy here that we're about to stamp, and I think back to the downtown revitalization plan or waterfront development plan where it wasn't debated, and then these issues come up later. So I think if we're not prepared to have a conversation tonight, maybe we should schedule it in the future. But I definitely am supportive of the plan. I'm not supportive of approving it without debating it.
I will look to my colleagues as to how you want it. This is a big document and there is a lot of information in it. I think we have consensus to adopt it, but we may need more time than we want to take tonight to debate every issue that might be in the plan. So I'll look to my colleagues. Councillor McKenna and then Councillor Brennan.
I'm in line with Councillor McGuire that some of my questions are not, they're more about the implementation and how it fits in with our resources to carry it out. And so there's a lot of that. We know what it is, how. You know.
Yeah. Councillor Brennan?
I think my questions were answered. I mean, it relates to how it's implemented. So, you know, as we go down the line, the principal is right. The priorities may not be, in my view, the way it should go, but we could, I'm perfectly comfortable to support it as it is. And then we take it as it comes in terms of the projects and the priorities within that document. So my questions have been answered.
And Mayor Panko?
No, I mean, I appreciate the effort to keep the meeting moving, but if members of the council have a few questions tonight that can be answered while Kim and Nicole are here, I'm fine taking another 5 or 10 minutes, whatever it takes to sort of work through that. So whatever member of council has a comfort level they need to make a decision on this.
Okay, then we'll circle back to Councillor McGuire and please continue.
Thanks. So the on-road bicycle route, what does that look like right now, and what does the shared space look like going forward?
Kim, if I could defer to yourself, you're quite intimate with the plan.
Yes, there's lots of pages. I can understand how there's a lot of information to get through. So essentially the on-road bicycle facilities, those are shared space. They won't look that much different than what they do today from that standpoint. As you said, every road is a shared space. A bike can ride on any road. It's a vehicle. It's allowed to be in there as part of the Highway Traffic Act. When we have a shared facility defined within the plan itself, within the network, it just means that what we've done is we have reviewed it from a speed and from a traffic volume perspective, and that the volumes are or the speed as a combined, when we're looking at it as a combined element, that the shared facility would be sufficient as a facility for that particular type of roadway. A lot of those tend to be on the local or the smaller roads. There's two different pieces of it. One is obviously if, this comes and back to speaking to the element of if you can upgrade, if you can upscale what you're doing compared to what is in the plan. We've put it in the plan because it meets the requirements based on the guidelines in the Ontario Traffic Manual to be a shared space. However, if you're going in and you're doing work on the roadway already and there is an opportunity to provide a bike lane or that side of things, by all means, from a cost scale, it's great. The other piece is that there is a policy side of things in there, and we call it the community safety zones. And so one of the recommendations was to look at developing a community safety zone policy. So what you would be agreeing to right now would just be the idea that you would look at that in the future. And a community safety zone looks at reducing the speeds on particular roadways. And so some of these local neighborhood ones where they're more a shared space might go from a 50 to a 40 or even as down as a 30 kilometer. The city of Ottawa, for example, right now are proposing 30 kilometer neighborhoods for some of their community safety zone areas. The other piece that comes into it with a shared space that as part of the network and being a shared space on the network, when it comes time to doing the wayfinding strategy and adding signage to the network itself, there's signage there that helps people and directs them to the roads that we want them to be using. And so because we've identified that as a particular road that can be ridden safely, mixed use, everybody all in the same space based on the volumes and speed, we highlighted as the connection road for people to use within the wayfinding strategy. And it's shown on the route map that people, we want them to be using that one, and people get used to seeing bikes and seeing cyclists and everybody on that road and know that the expectation is there. I hope that helps.
The shared space on Abbott and Chambers Street, I think those are the only two really busy sections of it. It's more of a space limitation, and it would be better to do more there if it was possible.
Yes, agreed. Through you, Madam Chair. Some of it was related. So there are some areas where we do have facilities that might be less than ideal in they meet the guidance and they meet that sort of the recommendation side of things. But if there's opportunities to upgrade and you're going in and you're building, then we would, this is where we, through the design process and through that side, we would be looking to, consider, make sure you're sort of keeping in back of mind of upgrading the facilities. Thank you.
Great, thanks. My next question is with the Active Transportation Advisory Committee. My preference would be to look at the terms of reference of the Transportation Advisory Committee and see if it's meeting our needs and what kind of representations there is. Is it common for municipalities to have a transportation advisory and an active transportation advisory committee?
I'm not sure who can answer that. Possibly CAO Morris. I doubt that they have an active transportation committee and then a transportation committee, but I can stand to be corrected. CAO Morris.
Yeah, through the chair, a great question. And I mean, if we look at the kind of the evolution of the Transportation Advisory Committee, not too long ago, they were simply the Traffic Advisory Committee. I think this plan provides a great impetus to relook at the terms of reference and expand it to reflect the realities of today's transportation system. So I would be a proponent of not developing a new committee, but changing the mandate and perhaps expanding the membership to accommodate a broader portfolio.
And Councillor McGuire, have you got another one? And then I'll circle to Councillor McKenna, or is there?
Yeah, I can take a break. I can keep going.
No, go ahead with it. No, go ahead.
Yeah, so
Get 3, and then I'll move on to 3 more, and then I'll come back to you.
There was a reference to Thurber Street having trouble finding it in my PDF now, but saying Elmsley to Thurber, getting that down. But then in the map, it shows the green line all the way from Elmsley all the way down to Hershey Drive. And I'm wondering, is that intentional, or is that whole stretch part of the first priority cycle track or buffered lane or whatever?
Going to guess that Kim Hunton may have the answer to that.
I was going to say, Madam Chair, if I could just, if we could come back to that question. I'm
Yeah,
going to
sure.
ask Nikki to I don't have that map open in front of me right now. And so
No,
if I
that's
can
fine.
just,
We'll pause that one for a second. If Councillor McGuire, you want to pause on that one.
Yeah,
I'll go
sorry,
to-
I lost my page number for reference, but
was it on the map, the priority mapping?
yeah, it was the priority mapping and then the table that the recommendation table.
The project table, like the Excel project table, was it? Just to be clear, because that might be how we can clarify as well for you.
Yeah, it's definitely in the Excel table. So just with the 2 PDFs for. Yeah.
So you're just looking for clarification on the how far the priority on Thurber.
Just having it end at Thurber Street, I didn't understand that, where there's also a high priority happening at Hershey Drive. But then maybe it's because Queen Street starts at Thurber Street, so it's just the labeling, I think. Yeah, that must be it.
I think.
Yes. Thurber, so it's all
yes.
When it's just
exactly. I think it's just the naming, the way that the streets where the name break is.
Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah.
I have 2 more. The one is the sidewalks. I noticed in the proposed map that we still show 2 sidewalks on a lot of streets that I think, based on our sidewalk policy, are probably going to be put down to 1 sidewalk as those streets get redeveloped. Are you suggesting that we keep 2 sidewalks on those streets, or what's the?
We didn't take away, Madam Chair, through you,
Yeah.
we didn't take away any facilities. If they were existing today, we didn't take those away. From the policy side,
And again, CO Morris, or Director McMunn, correct me if I'm wrong, but this started when Director Dunlop was here And C.O. Morris, I think you have your hand up. You can maybe shed some light. I'm not sure there was a formal policy, but go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So we did not adopt a formal policy. It was, I think, a direction based on a specific construction project that we were working on at the time. So I would suggest that we circle back and formalize the policy. In terms of which one prevails, I would suggest any policy that council develops would supersede a plan. So the plan that you see in front of us is representative of a combination of what exists and what should exist. But our corporate policy as it relates to the number of sidewalks on specific classes of streets would prevail. So it's an important disconnect that we need to connect, and we will do that.
Thank you. I keep losing Councillor Dwyer and Councillor Brennan. Are they still here? I've lost both of them off the screen. This is the second time in 10 minutes or so that I've lost them. So, oh,
sorry, Madam Chair. I keep excusing myself to deal with family matters and turn my video off, but I am still here.
And Councillor Brennan, is he there somewhere?
He's still on the call.
He's on the call.
Okay. Councillor McGuire, have you got?
Yeah, last comment.
I just want to get a glass of water. Sorry, I'm here.
The intersection where Beckwith North, Montague, Ogden, and Milne come together is a real collector, and it also feeds from the subway, the multi-use subway under the tracks that goes to Lanark Street and has that whole section up to Rideau Avenue. I think, what is it, 8,000 cars a day are using Beckwith Street North to get to Highway 15. What was the reason that that was not included, and is there anything, I just wanted to understand that better, I guess.
This is on the north side of
It's just
Elmsley. Sorry.
Yeah, just north of Elmsley.
Nikki, I might, Madam Chair, if I can ask Nikki to tap into that one.
Yep, certainly.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So sorry, Councillor McGuire, could you just repeat or direct me exactly to where you're referring to?
Yeah, it's if you go 2 blocks north of Beckwith and Elmsley. There's that awkward intersection with Ogden, Montague, Beckwith North, and Milne.
Sorry, just give me one moment.
I think, Madam Chair, actually, I think we can probably take another look at that one. It was one that we had looked at initially in some of our original networks. We ended up with the Elmsley, because we had Elmsley and then Highway 15, like on Cornelia, we had that kind of connection. And then overall with the network over on, Daniel Street, we had a few different connections without using that particular link. And I think we would have to go back and take a look and see if that was one. I might have to circle back with you, Councillor McGuire, on that, because that one might have been one where we had some issues with the right of way and what could be implemented from the perspective of what the volumes and that side of things are. So if we could circle back to you on that one, it would be great, because I do think we had initially, and we can take another look at that one.
Great, thank you.
Councillor McGuire?
Give me one more. We had a pedestrian crossing on Beckwith Street at William in the original Beckwith Street design, but we took it out because of concerns about traffic. I think at this point we can say the traffic concerns were unfounded. How come that wasn't included, and should that be something that we would want to consider at a future date.
On Beckwith Street, Councillor McGuire?
Beckwith and William. Remember we had the POX we were going to put in?
Yeah, no, I think I understood the consultants to say they didn't do any of that because both Beckwith Phase 1 and 2 were outside of what they were planning for. CO Morris, did you have shed some light there?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, we didn't ask WSP to consider it since it's a fresh project, but a valid question. I would answer it by saying that any analysis of the functioning of that of the street should probably be left until Phase 2 is finished, and more importantly, until traffic volumes return to pre-pandemic levels. I think it would be important to get typical conditions, and I would submit that we're not in a situation to have typical conditions just yet. But it's something staff can certainly flag and we'll keep an eye on, and we can perform pedestrian ped counts at that intersection just to measure the demand over time.
Councillor McGuire, I'm going to give you a break and move to Councillor McKenna for a while.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess CO Morris answered part of my question. It was around when I looked at the Eastern Ontario Active Transportation Network, I didn't see any municipalities as small as ours involved, and I didn't do an exhaustive search. There's Brockville and Cornwall, but I didn't see any, Perth or Carleton Place, or I'm not saying they shouldn't. So my question is around, and you answered it when you said it's more than aspirational. It is a plan, but your bylaws and your policies trump the goals of the plan. However, this plan called for, and I didn't count them all, but significant policy changes, plan changes, and bylaw changes, including going right to the official plan and adopting it to include this, which I think is all good. I just wonder about our capacity to, given our size and our modest staff resources, to actually carry out this really important plan. It's a wonderful plan, but if we don't have the horsepower to deliver on it, I just wanted, and maybe not for today, but when you go to operationalize this, that implementation and the long-term planning of this, do we have the capacity to actually do it? Is my question.
Yeah, CO Morris.
Yeah, valid observation to be sure. So I would suggest that we haven't necessarily, we've put time frames, so short-term, medium, and long-term. So some of the policy changes will come over time. One of the recommendations is to hire a active transportation coordinator to help give us the resources to do it. I would suggest in that vein, I agree with the spirit of adding more resources, but Mr. McMunn is still fairly new in the role and has some ideas on the evolution of the department. So we'll be coming back through the budget process to look at capacity within the department. So I would answer your question by saying it's a valid point. We do need to look at staff resourcing, and we will do that as part of our as part of the overall organizational review that's underway. So you're right, we are small, but I would remind council that we're mighty.
I don't think we need the reminder. Now, Councillor McGuire, this is not really a debate that we're having. You are asking a number of very informed, well-informed, and necessary questions, but it's not exactly a debate we're having. So I'm wondering how you're feeling now, or if you've got several more questions that you'd like answered tonight.
No, I'm feeling a lot better. I think it's really impressive to have a document this long that has this much content in it. It
is, and I considered dealing with this tonight because of its length. But I was also very impressed with the level of detail, the planning, the phasing, the the costing, as Mayor Panko said earlier, I was left with very few questions in terms of the overall. So if you are comfortable, then Councilor McGuire, that you have most of your questions, you have a comfort level that you can address these questions, direct questions with Ms. Director McMunn or WSP. I would suggest that we, and I think I don't think anyone's changed their mind about the consensus to move forward to adopt the plan. Is everybody still comfortable with that? Okay, that being the case, then again, thank you, Director McMunn. Thank you, Ms. Hunden and Mr. Tsatsulis. It was 275 pages, but I did not get bored because you really closed all the circles, all the loops that you started with. So I appreciate all the work you and our Director of Public Works have put into this. And we will then move ahead with our next priority item, which is the exemption to the procurement policy, and that is with our Chief Cheeseborough.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The purpose of my report tonight is to seek direction and approval from Council for an exemption to the procurement policy to sole source for a rapid intervention kit. The recommendations that Council, the Corporation Town of Smith Falls, approve an exemption of the procurement policy to allow staff to sole source the procurement of a rapid intervention kit from AJ Stone Company in the amount of $6,500 plus net HST for a total of $6,614. This report seeks approval to purchase the rapid intervention kit that is compatible with our current self-contained breathing apparatus from AJ Stone. They are the sole supplier for the MSA breathing apparatus in Ontario. The rapid intervention kit provides the department the ability to go in to retrieve and rescue downed firefighters that may be trapped in a building during fire suppression and rescue activities. And I know this is certainly fresh in a number of people's minds that within the last week, a neighboring department experienced those tragic events where 2 firefighters were injured and had to be rescued. This kit provides the ability for firefighters to go in and provide air up to 60 minutes for a firefighter or firefighters that may be trapped within the building. The contents of the rapid intervention kit is obviously a mask, a regulator, high and low pressure breathing system, a 60-minute lightweight bottle, a quick fill reconnection, and the face piece to connect directly to the breathing apparatus. The harness that the kit is carried in is flame resistant and heat resistant, made from Nomex and Kevlar. When we went through our options and our analysis, all breathing apparatus manufacturers are not compatible. They're one of the pieces of equipment within the fire service that each manufacturer has their own connections, and unfortunately, they're not compatible with the other breathing apparatus. The budget and financial implications, we had identified equipment for our breathing apparatus in the 2021 budget. There was $20,000 that was approved in last year's budget for equipment for our SCBA. The total equipment cost is indicated previously as $6,614, and I'm seeking approval to go ahead and purchase this piece of equipment.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions or concerns? We've got thumbs up all the way along. Chief, you have your direction.
Thanks very much.
And 8.3 then is pre-budget approval for town hall renovation project, and that is with Director Manhire. And he is with us somewhere. There he is.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just after the meeting last week where we presented the plan and got final direction from council, we have consolidated the costs for the IT equipment and any other features in the cost estimates. That is included in the report that we have that you have in front of you today. So we are looking to have pre-budget approval for phase 3 of the project in the amount of $1,950,000. $949,636, which includes the non-recoverable HST. The reason for the pre-budget approval is to have the project tendered as soon as possible and close out. The plan is to close out the tender in the middle of January, have a contract awarded, and have work start on the project as early as possible in the new year. And that allows us for that construction period of between 6 to 8 months as it's estimated now, so that the council chambers, as well as the rest of the final phase of the town hall renovation, be completed by the end of the summer, so that we can have occupancy at that point.
Thank you. And I think I saw Councillor Dwyer's hand first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So further to my questions last week, which were specific about whether or not pre-budget approval was necessary, and I was told it was not. I am not comfortable making this decision when we still have a $21 million capital budget to debate as part of our budgeting procedure. I think we would all love to see this project go ahead, but I think that there's still a fair amount of discussion that council needs to undertake before we start greenlighting more capital works, particularly those of a significant price tag. I also maintain, as was my point last week, that while the construction forecast for this project anticipates that council chambers will be usable again in September, I highly question whether or not that is reasonable, considering the time and extensions of timelines that we saw on previous phases of this development. I think it would be lovely to have the council chambers usable by the time inauguration comes around for the newly elected council, but I don't think that's necessarily a reason to rush forward with pre-budget approval for this project, because I think it's unlikely based on our previous experiences. So I am not in favor of the request for pre-budget approval, but I do look forward to debating this as part of the budget process, which we should be finalizing within the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Other comments, questions from council? Councillor McKenna.
Just, I guess, the opposite of Councillor Dwyer. I'm ready to throw my support behind the pre-budget approval on this. This has been a priority for a number of years. It's not a new item or new capital project. That this has been a phased in. This is the final phase of our town hall redevelopment. So it's something we expected. We have the details. This was always going to be approved, intended to be approved this in the 2022 budget. So I'm ready to move forward.
Any other questions, Mayor? First of all, Councillor McGuire, and then Mayor Panko.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I share Councillor Dwyer's surprise of seeing this week. After last week, we were told we didn't need to do it. I think it's an important project. I want to see it move forward, but I'm also concerned that if we get some of that grant funding that we're hoping for, I just don't understand what that's going to do to the capital budget. And if we put down 10% right now of this 20 million, I'm not sure how that's going to affect us in our budget discussions. So I don't know if anybody has more information on that or what to help understand the decision.
Okay, Mayor Panko, you're.
I'm not sure if staff want to provide an answer to Councillor McGuire. If not, I can go ahead if you like.
Go ahead. There may be other questions, and give staff a chance to ponder that, and you may have something else to add to the list.
Okay. No, this has been a phased approach. Of course, phase 1 and 2 completed in the last, I guess, during this term or at the end of the last term. I support the recommendation, and I appreciate the apprehension from some members of committee here tonight. But my feeling is the largest capital project for for 2022 is a water tower. And I think in all probability, even if funding, we receive the funding that we've requested or we've applied for that does come in, it's probably very unlikely we would be spending the vast majority of that money in 2022. Even if we started mid-year, it's probably largely a 2023 project. So when it comes to priorities within the capital scope of our budget, this is right up there. As we've discussed countless times, the stairs are not safe. I don't feel comfortable even people going up and down them. We don't have an elevator that provides accessibility to our council chambers. There's so many deficiencies here that we need to address. Unsuitable space for our staff, and we each have to have heaters throughout the winter time, and the needs to improve the building envelope and energy efficiency and everything. So I'm comfortable. We've come as far in the plan. I can't imagine us shelving it for another year, and pre-budget approval may give us the opportunity to get hopefully maybe better pricing, if at all possible, for contractors looking for the winter work, and get this done. We hopefully by mid next year we're in a position where we can move back into in-person meetings, and we need an environment to support that. So I'm prepared to move ahead.
Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. I have great concerns with you know, the size of the capital projects that we've got planned here, and the mayor just outlined the big one, the water tower, which probably won't be all funded next year. So we've got to sharpen our pencils on capital, that's for sure, but not on this project. This needs to be done post haste, and this is the third phase, and you know, with the mayor and Lorraine and I. And then we had past councillors that had struggles getting up the stairs, and we've had constituents have struggles getting up the stairs, and the space that the staff works in is quite frankly embarrassing. And this is not on the table for me to shelve this year. And I think that you know, staff have done an exhaustive process in terms of consulting us and coming up with a design we can live with, I think we can be proud of. And this needs to go forward. So I support that. And I look forward to a budget discussion on the other capital items, because it is sizable for sure. And but we'll have that discussion. But this for me is not on the table. So I support the staff recommendation.
And I see you nodding, Councillor Allen. You feel similarly? Okay. I'm just keeping track of what consensus is. We have consensus, as I agree with the majority here, that this is long overdue. There's no point in delaying anymore with regard to this phase 3. So that will move forward tonight then, Deputy Clerk Bennett? Into council?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. With regard to 5 Abbott Street, 8.4, that is with our senior planner, Mr. Grenke.
Mr. Morris had his hand up, Councillor.
Oh,
Alfred.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yes, thank you. I just feel that there was a stranded question from Councillor McGuire. That we
Oh, I
didn't
thought
answer.
I thought Mayor Panko had kind of answered it. That's why I didn't go to you. But if you have more to add to, go ahead.
I don't. I just want to make sure it was answered, and if not, we will provide an answer.
Were you satisfied with the answer from Mayor Panko, Mr. McGuire?
I don't think it matters. We have consensus, and 7 o'clock. So.
Okay, we will be here as long as we need to. Thank you, Mayor, or thank you, Mr. Morris. This will return to 8.4 at 5 Abbott Street.
Madam Chair, Treasurer
Yes.
Cozille had her hand up.
I cannot see her. That's sorry, Janet. I didn't mean to ignore you. I have to work 2 screens in order to see everyone. Go ahead.
No, through the chair, I just want to sort of seek clarification. There were some options on how to fund this. What we can do, there was long-term debt, but and also using the rate stabilization reserve, which we would if indeed our surplus comes from 2021, then we would transfer it over to the capital reserve. But I just want to be certain of how you want to fund this. We could come back before we actually obtain the loan and make clarification then. But there were two options within the plan on how to fund it. So within the report.
I didn't know that was the second part. I wasn't clear that was what you needed a question for that you need direction on tonight when I was reading the report, but maybe I've missed something. You want direction on how to fund it tonight?
Well, maybe the clerk can indicate how she could draft the resolution for that.
The motion. Through the chair, the motion that's on the council agenda is simply providing pre-budget approval at this point in time in the amount as stipulated by Director Manhire, and it's to allow them to proceed with tender. It does not get into where the money would be coming from.
I'm sure we'll be hearing and needing your guidance when we get to that part, though, Treasurer Kozeel. Okay, so that I got to keep my head up here and make sure I've got everybody. Okay, with that said, then we will move on to 8.45 Abbott Street porch encroachment with Mr. Grinke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Council. I'm just bringing forward a recommendation to enter into an encroachment agreement with the owners of 5 Abbott Street to formalize the encroachment of a single detached dwelling on an existing porch on municipal land. So by all information available, this is an encroachment that's been in place for many, many years. And the application and the proposal is to formalize that through an agreement. The Public Works Department has some recommended condition based on sort of the uniqueness of some of the site, but with council's with committee's endorsement, staff would be bringing forward a bylaw to authorize that. Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns? I'm seeing consensus. I did have one question, Carl. Or sorry, was that a question, Jay? Or
yeah, I'm just going to clarify. It's a 0.29 meter encroachment. So I support the recommendation. 0.29.
I think there was more to the 2.29. Councillor Dwyer?
Sorry, not to sound like a broken record, but I thought we were going to update our procedural bylaw and delegation bylaw to deal with administrative matters like this through delegated authority. Are we any closer to getting to that?
I think we had an update from Director Costello that we should see that shortly. I didn't take her to mean we'd see it this week.
No, that was the procedural bylaw, but the delegated authority bylaw would need to be updated too. Do we have any update on that?
Malcolm.
Yes, through the chair. We are working on that. It's not ready to bring forward. There were a few areas that we're going to seek delegated authority across the corporation. So this is a really good example of one, but we're not quite ready. But certainly in the first quarter of 2022, we'll have something for you.
Anything else? I had one question in that when I checked out this one, the one next door is in the same boat. Do these things only come up when ownership changes? When there are ownership changes? Yes, Carl.
That's usually that's when they get flagged. There's likely many situations such as this throughout the municipality, and lawyers like to have these items sort of clarified and confirmed, just so there isn't anything hanging over it. But there's little doubt in my mind that there will be more of these coming to the town over the coming years as they get discovered.
Okay, I did think I saw, can I not have another show of hands that we were in consensus to give staff direct? Perfect. Carl, you have your direction. That being said, we'll move to 8.5, which is heritage designations bylaw rewrite. And that is also with Mr. Grinke.
Thank you. Staff are bringing forward a request for out-of-budget approval by the Municipal Heritage Committee to advance the completion of a project that involves the rewriting of 15 of our existing heritage designation bylaws, as well as the preparation of 3 new heritage designating bylaws that the MHC would like to explore for existing heritage properties of interest. Every year, the Municipal Heritage Committee receives a budget allocation, which predominantly goes towards their annual symposium, as well as a variety of other promotional items and projects such as plaques. This year and last year, the symposium unfortunately did not run, given the uncertainty regarding the local public health situation. In the absence of the symposium this year, the committee was interested in using their allocated budget to undertake operational and policy training and enhancement and a governance audit. And as such, 2 separate requests for quotes were launched to seek professional services to assist. While 2 substantive quotes were received from qualified providers, the cost exceeded the budget, and as such, an evaluation committee of MHC members directed the scoping of the deliverable to what the MHC had identified was a priority, and that was the revamping of our designation bylaws, many of which were written in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, before the current iteration of the Ontario Heritage Act. Many of the bylaws we have now are vague, broad, and in the opinion of the committee and of staff, do not always provide meaningful direction in identifying properties' heritage attributes, which impacts their protection and creates uncertainty for property owners, staff, and the committee when we have inquiries on heritage properties. The MHC passed a resolution on October 27th requesting out of budget approval for 2021 to allow this project to go ahead as soon as possible, which is anticipated to lead to the completion of bylaws to be brought forward to council in the second quarter of 2022, as well as helpful templates to guide the preparation of future designation bylaws. If council authorizes this expenditure out of budget, the MHC will be seeking reserve in 2022 for the purposes of funding a new heritage symposium that they're looking to host later in the year. And I'll certainly look to councillors McGuire and Allen who sit on the Municipal Heritage Committee if for any additional feedback and context with respect to this proposal. Thank you.
You're muted, Wendy.
Thank you, Carl. Go ahead, Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm supportive of the staff recommendation. I did have a question. If we rewrite the 15 existing heritage bylaws, and let's say we update them and align them with the current heritage legislation, is that retroactive that the owners of those heritage properties would now be have potentially a new set of obligations that would govern what they can and cannot do? Or would these be grandfathered in some way?
Oh,
Not sure who can answer that. Yes, Mr. Granke.
so thank you, Councillor. So the properties are already designated, so they've gone through the designation process under guiding legislation. If we were to be adopting repealing and replacing, I think I would need to investigate the mechanics of the Ontario Heritage Act to confirm what our statutory requirements would be, but certainly the municipality has the ability to go above and beyond, even if we weren't obligated to notify the owners. We can certainly consider doing that as a courtesy and as a best practice to ensure that this is a collaborative approach as much as possible. But certainly that's a conversation we can have once I familiarize myself with that section of the Act.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Allen, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, no, I sit on the Municipal Heritage Committee, and I know that Councillor McGuire has pecuniary interest in this, so I'm happy to report that the committee has worked a lot. I know since I've been on it the last 11 years, and before that, we've been doing them ourselves, and oftentimes it's a lot of work, and it doesn't get done as efficiently or as quickly as we would like it to. The other thing is the beginning, the binder that we were given many years ago, the identifications were not even described in very much detail. They were designated, but some of the things that we know should have been mentioned, we've rewritten and mentioned. And so that's part of the reason why we feel this is such a priority. And to answer Councillor McKenna's question too, we do meet with the owners and we do explain those things to them, and generally they come to an agreement that this is good for their property. It's all about I think it's all about us creating this information and a working condition with the owners of the buildings, because I think for the most part, they know what a valuable asset they have and what a building that's worth protecting. So I think that this will really help the committee, because sometimes we feel like, I know that one of our members has been writing many of them over the years, and I think it will be just a really good thing for us to be able to get those finished.
Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. One of the things that seems to be happening more and more is the dramatic increase in insurance premiums as the insurance industry starts to get a lot more protective over risk liability on heritage buildings. And one of the reasons that this legislation is coming forward is to deal with the ambiguity around the designation of these properties, which was previously acceptable under the old LAC Act format, but now as modern convention seems to dictate more detail, the purpose of updating the bylaws to get a really meaningful attribute list is to help provide a lot of clarity, not only to property owners, but industry professionals about what it actually means to be designated and where that intrinsic value of the property lies. And as much as the Ministry of Culture, Tourism and Sport has been advocating for statements of significance and heritage attribute lists for many years, I think this new legislation through Bill 108 is really going to be the turning point to require municipalities to really kind of step up to the plate and start to provide the much needed level of detail that has been missing for decades in these bylaws. So I'm really excited to see this happen. I think our municipality is actually the first one recently to go forward with kind of updating all of our previous bylaws, and it is a epidemic across the province. So it's exciting to see. This is really good. And quite frankly, I think we're getting a pretty good value out of the consultants to do this, because this is a major undertaking. So congratulations to our Municipal Heritage Committee. This is a huge victory for you. And I'm so delighted to see it coming forward.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'm going to take a moment to ask a couple of questions of my own. Yeah, because we don't often see something like a municipal or any committee asking for a rewrite of bylaws. That's usually comes from different players, at least I haven't. I do see why staff would be supportive of this, because it helps them when they're considering developments, especially in light of all the activity we've had. But I did have one question. It's probably more for the treasurer or the CAO than anyone else. I'm going to go back to talking about the building services reserve, because I think that something like this potentially could be linked to the building reserve. And our building reserve is rather healthy. And I do think where we can, and it can be linked, or that case can be made to use building reserve money as opposed to other money. In this case, there is no budget for it. That I would encourage the treasurer and CAO to search out those opportunities and have them funded by that healthy building reserve, where we don't, and that reserve is continuing to grow as we are. So I mentioned it one other time, and I'm going to mention it again for this project, that perhaps the building services reserve can be funding some of these things. Then we wouldn't be out of budget either. So yes, C.O. Morris.
We can certainly have a look at the appropriateness of doing so and report back.
Thank you. Okay, so we have though consensus to go ahead with this. I think I saw that clearly. Okay, and then we will ask Councillor McGuire to return, and we will deal with 8.6 and then 8.7. Thank you, Councillor McGuire. So this is 8.6 model home agreement with Parkview Homes. That is also with Mr. Grenke. This is 3 for 3, Carl. So
Thank you, Madam Chair. Staff are requesting council's authorization to enter into model home agreements with Parkview Homes to accommodate the initiation of 3 townhouse blocks of 5 units each in phase 2 of the Bellamy Farm subdivision prior to.
I feel you, Carl. I've had 2 make an appearance in the last 5 minutes.
Go ahead, Carol, when you can. First priority is whoever, what little voice that was.
That was my 5-year-old just heading off to bed. As noted in the report, the draft approval conditions allow for consideration of model home approvals before final approval, and this is not unusual in subdivision developments. Typically, the model homes aren't fully connected to services, and of course, they can't be sold or occupied. In this case, we had a request from Parkview for 3 blocks, which is less typical, and that request was based on their urgency to get foundations in the ground before fall. The developers and their engineers continue to work on finalizing engineering plans for grading, drainage, stormwater management, and other technical aspects that need to be completed before final approval can be given. Staff did run this proposed approach for the 3 blocks by our legal counsel, who advised that the approach was workable, provided the appropriate provisions were worked into an agreement that assigned all risks and costs to the developers. Town staff and several departments and the developers agreed in principle to the provisions outlined in the report, and these are being finalized in an agreement, again, with the assistance of Mr. Fleming. Well, with council's blessing, an agreement can be signed very shortly. Model home building permits would not be able to be issued until satisfactory grading and drainage provisions are in place, and the Public Works Department and Parkview's engineer are working on that, and securities would be required as well. In this case, we view the model home agreement as an interim measure to govern the start of the work, and it will be replaced by a site plan control agreement that will ensure that the final grading, drainage, landscaping, and other work aligns with the master plans that will be approved through the subdivision. With all of this in mind, staff are amenable to the request and recommend council authorizes the execution of these agreements. Thank you.
Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. I don't have any objection to the idea of doing model homes. I think this is kind of the first time we've ever done that in town, and it is kind of an industry best practice. I do worry about the number of townhomes that are being proposed back to back to back. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that there was a big story in Ottawa about townhomes burning to the ground because they were in an area of a subdivision that just wasn't accessible and didn't have appropriate access to a fire hydrant. So Carl, can you just verify that that the fire chief has reviewed this proposal, has no concerns with minimum separation distances between the buildings or adequate ability to get a fire truck in there? In this particular location, I mean, these units are backing on to occupied homes. So if something were to go south, it would go south in a big way.
I just would, because I see that one of the things that the developer had to agree to was just what you've mentioned, to maintain access to and water supply as directed by the fire department. That was one of the conditions by which this was going to get done. Is that correct, Carl?
That's correct, Councillor. We would be looking for the building department and the fire services to be comfortable before we can proceed with that permit, and I can certainly clarify from the conversations I've been a part of and observed, fire separation between these buildings that are very close together is something that's taken very, very seriously by building services staff. So I would rely on, and we would rely on their confirmation before we can proceed this way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that helps clarify my point. I mean, my question was just about kind of the sequencing of that, and it sounds like we're going to agree in principle, provided they can meet additional hurdles, rather than doing the review first and granting approval.
Thank you, Mayor Panko. Did you see your hand up?
Yeah, quick question, Carol. How many units does this involve, the 3 blocks? I can go ahead, Carl.
Sorry. 5 units in each block, a total of 15.
Okay. Well, I support the recommendation. I guess the key thing we need to remember that these are all homes which have been pre-sold. There are probably buyers with anticipated occupancy dates who have to plan at the other end when they're going to be either selling their existing home or moving out of an apartment or wherever they're coming from. So the ability to get these moving ahead probably makes, I guess, a big relief to Parkview and probably to the ultimate occupants of these units. So I think it's a creative way of enabling these to move ahead, and I support the recommendation.
Any other thoughts, questions? No, so this is in fact, if I may be allowed, this is, I was going to ask why 3 blocks, 15 units, but this is just a workaround. This isn't, these aren't really model homes. This is a workaround. Is that correct? CEO Morris?
Yeah, I think that would be a good way to describe it. It's reasonably unorthodox approach, but it is an innovative way to keep things, to keep construction moving. So I think the implication here is we don't want to rely on this in the future as a way to get houses built. So from a staff point of view, we're looking at this as not necessarily a precedent-setting approach. It seems appropriate in the circumstances. With
that caveat, I will, and because staff is recommending it, but this is, I read it differently about model homes, and this is not what they in fact are. They're new construction, and we found a workaround to allow Parkview to continue. And you're right, I would not want to see this continued practice past this. Councillor Dwyer?
Thank you. Yeah, they're almost more akin to dry model permits or dry permits rather than an actual model home, which again is something that municipalities do on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, so it appears we have consensus to move this forward. We do. You have your direction, Mr. Grinke. And now we will go on to 8.7, and Deputy Clerk Bennett, I'm trying to remind myself of what 8.7, how are we titling this?
It was a RFP with respect to town facility, former water.
Right, and I believe CEO Morris, you're going to speak to this?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So back in the autumn of 2017, staff issued an RFP through our Economic Development Department at the time. And the subject of the RFP was to redevelop the former water treatment plant at 25 Old Mill Road. The product of that process was to choose a proponent that we would negotiate, exclusively negotiate with the proponent to develop or to create a development agreement. The proponent in this case put a great deal of effort into the project and brought a proposal forward. Things changed considerably when the pandemic visited upon us. He since changed his plans, and he's at the point now where the project is not viable for him. So the recommendation here is to terminate RFP ED-03, and so terminate the RFP altogether. And then staff will develop a new RFP and put it back out on the market.
Okay, is any questions or concerns with that? Yes, Councillor McGuire and then Councillor Dwyer.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, CEO Morris. It's exciting, at least, that something's going to happen again on this file. And thanks to all the work that's been going on behind the scenes. I'd like a chance for the Municipal Heritage Committee to take a look at the RFP before it goes out. I'd really like to see points awarded for recycling and reusing existing structures and buildings as a modification to the new round.
And CEO Morris, you can take that under advisement?
Yes, certainly. Yes, great idea.
Thank you. And Councillor Dwyer, did you have?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think it's good to see some forward progress on this. I think it's been a very long time coming, and it was kind of one of those key deliverables under the waterfront and downtown revitalization master plan. So it will be really nice to see it move forward. It's disappointing that the current proponent was not able to keep the momentum going, but I think we can appreciate the effort and the vision that he put forward on this. But I do very much look forward to the RFP coming back for council sanction and approval before it goes live, because I think we're all very, very interested to see what that looks like before it goes out for RFP submission.
Any other comments or questions? Do we, Councillor McKenna?
I'm just trying to recall how many RFPs council reviews in the past. I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. I'm just saying it seems to me a little unusual for us to get into the RFPs themselves as opposed to giving direction. So I'm not opposed. Councillor Dwyer, I think that's a good idea. If the rest of council does, then I'm all on board with it. It's just a little unusual, I think.
Any big thumbs up from Councillor Allen. Did you want to elaborate on that, Councillor Dwyer?
I do. I think to Councillor McKenna's point, I think it is unusual. It's not something that we typically get involved in, but I think for something that is so high profile as this, it would give us good opportunity to kind of publicly showcase what it is that the town is looking for in a proponent, and perhaps even if we facilitate it through a public meeting, so that we can allow for some dialogue back and forth with either bidding proponents, potentially interested bidding proponents, or members of the public. I think it's a level of project that warrants that level of public oversight, including comment by council before issuance.
Councillor McKenna?
Yeah, that's a very good explanation. Is there any risk at, I'm just trying to think, is there any risk to the RFP process, the propriety of it, by having it publicly considered? I guess it's public once it goes out, but if, I don't know, if we all said we wanted blue walls and, you know, and the RFP went out differently with that, is there any way that we could muck up the RFP process? They are very technical. I don't want to muck it up.
I'm going to look to CAO Morris.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not uncommon to engage in what the council's wishes are for the site in terms of the vision for the site. I would just remind committee that it is a reasonably complex site, and we purposely left the previous RFP fairly open. We wanted to give proponents a lot of berth, as it were, to come back with something creative. That's the whole intent of an RFP. It's not to specify what we want. It's to say, here's a development opportunity. Here are a few ground rules. Here are some public policy issues that we want to deal with, but we're inviting proposals. So we wouldn't want to be, my advice is not to be too specific in that process, but coming back to committee, you know, with the final draft for comment, I don't think would compromise the process. Going out to the public and including potential bidders could very well compromise the process.
Okay, so do we have consensus to move forward with as CAO Morris has outlined? Okay, that's good. Okay, so then we have completed our mission for COW tonight. Can I get which councillor wishes to move adjournment? Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Dwyer. All those in favor? Thank you. Our Deputy Clerk Bennett's going to need about 5 minutes, maybe 6, to get, because we have a rather heavy agendas on council as well. So we will return in 5 to 6 minutes. Thank you.
Nikki, do you have time tomorrow for a brief call with me?
Yeah, I think so.
Not related to Carlton Place.
No.
No.
Hold on, let me check. We're
Which is-
we're insanely busy right now.
Okay, that's fine. Sometime this week,
Yeah. How long do you think it'll be?
10 minutes.
Oh, okay. Do you want me to call you on my way home? Like when I'm doing my drive?
Yeah, or your way to work, either one. Way home is fine.
Yeah, let me call
So-
you on the way home.
And you have that number?
Maybe not. I think we're live. So why don't you,
Okay.
Peter, why don't you email it to me?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, well, I've got everybody here, trying to get our seconders in place. Wendy's not back yet, but nor is Chris, nor is Jay. Okay, for 3, okay.
I'm here.
Okay, Wendy, you have item 7.1. You have a seconder?
If Jay's not here, so I'll take Peter.
Sure.
And Chris, for 7.2, your seconder? That's
Just
for-
a note that we are still live streaming, just so everyone's aware.
Yeah.
You have a seconder for yours, Chris?
Oh, you're muted, Chris.
You're muted.
Sorry, it's related to 45 Elmsley. So do you want to do that, Wendy?
Sure.
No, Jay's not back. 7.3, 7.4, Nikki.
I'm back.
Seconded. She's seconding mine.
Sorry.
I'm doing 7.5.
Okay, sorry, back to 7.4, Nikki, your seconder?
This is the CIP application. Lorraine, do you want to, can you second that one?
Okay,
Okay.
I'm gonna go,
So Lorraine and I are just on our resolutions.
okay.
Okay. And I have 7.3. Takers. Peter, thank you.
Peter, okay.
And
This will be here, I'll get down to 7.6 is Peter and
So one of the Jay,
yeah.
okay, 7 Maple, Jay.
Yeah.
7.7, Jay, procedural proceedings.
Chris.
7.8.
7.8, I have, I have that one with Councillor Alfred.
Okay. Seconder.
McGuire. If he has no objections.
7.9 is the encroachment with 5 Abbott Street, and I have Councillor McGuire.
Anybody want it?
I'll do it.
Okay.
7.10, I have Councillor Dwyer with that one. That's the model home agreement.
Doesn't matter. Wendy?
Right.
7.11, I have Councillor McKenna. That's transportation plan and complete streets policy.
We defer that for a week or two, or does that need to go through this week?
The directive was to proceed at COW, so I think if that's the request, it should be done during amendments to the agenda, as we're not actually called the meeting to order yet.
Do you get a second?
Mike,